Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the introduction. And yeah, as I just asked the question before, I have a background that's very much in cognitive psychology and UX research and design, and it's now moving a little bit more into survey methodology. So first of all, a challenge we all know in web surveys, it's difficult to monitor what's going on. It's difficult to get consistency between all of our respondents, to figure out if respondents are experiencing fatigue, how the engagement is, distractions, all of this. And it's just really difficult to figure out if the questions that are being asked are difficult for the respondents to answer. If they're ambiguous, are they answering the way that we intend them to understand? And this way we sometimes end up with measurement errors. One way of getting a deeper insight to this is through paradata. You can look at the response time in the different questions. Is it way longer? Is there a lot of variance in the length? In the questions, are people switching between response options, moving back and forth? And the last one, which is what I'm focusing on, and in the team we're focusing on, is mouse movements. So we have specifically been looking into mouse movements, and that's by using the Mousetrap package that some of our colleagues have been working on. And what you see here on the right is a GIF created of one of our surveys that we send out, and how the participant is moving the mouse and clicking on the response option and then moving on. So this package recovers all of the movements in sort of events with the timestamp of the patterns of the respondent's mouse. So we get the clicks, and we get also the hover time. For example, here you see the participant is pausing and then going over to the response, and then also clicking down to the next. So we see the hover time, and then we see this Y flips, which is the cursor moving back and forth between two or more options. And here, just a small one with very erratic movements, and someone who's up here reading the text, going back and forth, figuring, what do we want to answer? And we get a lot of what we see as hesitation, and is what we're trying to figure out if that is also the case. And of course, through all of these events, we also get the distance and the velocity and the acceleration. So we have a lot of data to work with that we can use to, So previous research on this topic, first of all, shows that there are a lot of similarities between mouse tracking and eye tracking. And eye tracking has been used to detect hesitation, attention, and other cognitive conflicts. And specifically, one study by one of our former colleagues has been looking into a different, pretty much the same question, but phrased in different ways. So here we see a manipulation of length and of complexity in the wording, and also of different response options, how difficult these are. And what they found here was that they trained a model to predict what kind of group, whether it was the difficult group or the easier group, based on the mouse movements. So essentially, it could help optimize the survey design. But the thing that we don't know is that we're not identifying what kind of challenges are we, how do we want to actually improve this survey question. So the extension that we have been working on is specifically to find and to see if there's a connection between the distinct cognitive challenges that the participants encounter and the way that they move their mouse around in the mouse trajectories. So let's look into it. We fielded 4 different questions with the UAS end-of-year survey, and we ended up with almost 10,000 participants. So thank you very much to the UAS for letting us do that. And because we wanted to figure out if there were any of these distinct cognitive challenges, we also wanted to field some questions that were rather complicated. And we took some inspiration from the RFF Climate Insight Study and ended up with these 4 questions that are asking specifically how much they trust the things that scientists say about the environment. And also, the second one is a bit of a tongue twister. If the world temperature did increase over the past 100 years, do you think this increase was caused mostly by the things people did, by natural causes, or equally by both things? So these are questions, and the last two are also on behavior and sort of the behavior of people, what they're doing to deal with global warming, and if the average temperature has been higher or lower in the last decade. Questions that we figured were rather complicated to answer. And just to show again, this is how it looked, sort of that we have all of the response options, and the participants were responding from completely to not at all in this specific case. And then moving on to these cognitive challenges, because after each of these four questions, we asked After each of the four questions, we asked the participants a follow-up question, one of these four, and that is based on the Tourangeau's cognitive response model. So we phrased these four questions, which go into each step here. So first with the comprehension, asking them how difficult it was to understand what this question, the previous question, asked about. Then moving on to the retrieval, how easy it was to think back and identify this information that they needed to answer the question. Moving on to judgment, how easy it was to reach the judgment they needed to figure out this information they needed. And finally, how easy it was to give their response in the end. And they rated this on a 7-point scale from very difficult to very easy. And unfortunately, we are just out of data collection. So we have not, I don't have any very specific results to show you, but in some weeks or so, or hopefully soon, if people are coming to APOR, you should be able to hear about it by then. We will have trained some models that can predict these cognitive responses based on the mouse movements. What we're going to do is we are taking the two questions types, the opinion and the factual ones, and then the four cognitive follow-up questions, and training 8 models here. And we are applying the methods of Fernandez-Fontelo, which was also the study I was referring to earlier, that is a model that considers all of these hovers, Y flips, response time, and also initiation times. And then based on some personalization from some baseline questions, we hope we will be able to pretty well predict where the participants are ending up. So what we have been working on the last couple of weeks is pre-processing of the data, and something really interesting actually came out of this. Of course, we looked into sort of removing the partial responses, people who spent an infinitely long time on the questions, and so on. But we also wanted to exclude the participants that were using smartphones, because obviously we don't have the proper mouse movements for them, and we don't have rich enough data to work with that as of right now. So what we did here was that we asked this question: what are you using to move the pointer around the screen while answering the survey? Should be straightforward enough. You answer either mouse, trackpad, touchscreen, or something else. What happened here, though, was that about 25% of the respondents actually answered incorrectly to this question. And the way we figured that out was through the mouse movements, because we could see that they actually had this much richer data where they moved around with the cursor on the screen. For a lot of the people that answered, they were using a mobile phone, and vice versa. We looked a little bit into the open-ended responses to the people who answered other, and it seemed like they misunderstood it as we were asking about the typical device they used. So that is quite interesting. And then what we did instead is that we looked into all of the trajectories, as we can see here over on the right. Every one of them where we had more than 50 events, we have classified them as using a mouse, because that for the mouse, we get the mouse movements updated every 100 milliseconds or so. Whereas with the touchscreen, we only get when they are actually tabbing on the screen. So the ones above 50 were put into the mouse category, and the ones below 10 were put into touch. And then we had a manual classification we sent off to some student assistants for the ones between 10 and 50. So that's what we've been working on so far. And just to show really quickly here, this is not the most interesting, but just I'm not sure if you're actually able to see it very well, but interestingly enough, quite a few people actually don't trust the scientists that much about what they have to say about the environment. which is interesting. And equally, we also see that for the world temperatures, that it varies quite a lot for whether it's the things that people did or it's about equally. Okay, so just very finally here we see that the responses for the follow-up questions, this is similar for all of the questions. We have very few data points in the category of very difficult, difficult and a little bit difficult. So we're working on dichotomizing these into smaller groups. Okay, that is all.